All right, so why don't we turn to Daniel chapter 3. I'm going to read. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of God whose height was 60 cubits and its breadth 6 cubits. It set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. The king Nebuchadnezzar sent to gather the satraps and prefects and the governors and the counselors and treasurers and the justices and magistrates and all the officials of the province to come up to the dedications of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then satraps, the prefects, and the governors and the counselors and treasurers, the justice and the magistrates, and all the officials of the province together for the dedications of the king image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And the herald proclaimed aloud that you are commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of a horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, and bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be cast into a burning, fierce furnace. Therefore, as soon as all the people heard a sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, and bagpipe, and every kind of music, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden image the king Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So let's just talk about some of the background here and the story. As we covered last week, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. And the dream that he had was, the statue. And he couldn't really figure it out what that means. So he actually called all the sorcerers and the astrologers and all of those people in Babylon to give the interpretation. He didn't even actually tell the dreams of what that was, but he was telling every the magicians and all the astrologers to come together and say, hey, tell me what dream I had and also give me the interpretations. So no one was able to really give the interpretations of Nebuchadnezzar. However, Daniel, because of the prayer and with his friends, God gave him a visions and gave interpretation of what that means. So what image he saw in a dream was have the gold, the head, and the silvers and the chest and the bronze, and then irons and the leg, the foot with iron plus mixture with clay. So as I was explaining to you, that was kind of like showing God was showing Nebuchadnezzar what kind of empire will come after his empire. So after he heard the interpretation of his own dream, obviously he praised the Lord. But coming into chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar actually made the statue. The statue that he made was about 60 cubits, and the size of the width of that statue was 6 cubits. So just to give you an understanding of what cubit means, so cubic is, you can think of it as it's about 45 centimeter or about 18 inches. So you can think of it as easily, there's no exact size of a cubit, but as I was explaining to many of you in the past, that you can think of it as a cubit is literally as just the adult's man from the middle finger right here, right from here to your elbow. That's 1 cubit. Literally, that's how they measure from top of the fingers to the elbow. You can think of it as 1 cubit. Okay, so if you could imagine, that's a 45 centimeter or the 18 inches. So it's a little bit, for people who are used to metrics. I mean, obviously, U.S. is the only country uses the feet, but the rest of the world use a metric, right? So for most of the people are much more familiar with the metrics rather than inches. So now you can think of it as 60 cubit. 60 cubit, when you think about it. So if 1 cubit is 45 centimeters, 2 cubit is 90 centimeter, which is close to the 1 meter. All right. Since this is like 2 cubit, it's close to the 1 meter. You can think of a 60 cubit is what? It's about 30 meters, right? 30 meters. So you can kind of tell how tall the statue is. So 6 cubit is about what? 3 meters, right? So you can imagine the size of the statue. So it's about close to 30 meter on height and 3 meters on the size of the statue. So it's pretty big statue. It's not a small statue. It's a very, very big statue. But the way he made it is this. He actually built this statue in a town called or province called Dura. Dura is where he actually made this statue. And then what he did was he actually made this statue in gold. So when you actually look at the verse 5, that when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, you are to fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. So this statue is purely made out of gold. There's no silver, no bronze, there's no iron, there's nothing else, just a pure gold. So you could imagine, making 30 feet tall, 6 feet wide statue made out of gold. That's lots of gold. That's a lot of gold. I don't know how much gold that you need to have really just make up the, that big of a gold statue. But the important part is this. This chapter 3 that we're just covering is coming right after, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream of the big statue that he saw in his dream. But remember, in his dream, that statue was only the head was the gold, the rest of it was made out of a different material, right? But now this time, after he heard interpretations from Daniel about what that statue really means, so head was the Babylon Empire. What's coming next is a Persian Empire, which he doesn't know, right? Because that happens after his death. And then after there's another empire comes, which is, the Greek Empire, and then third, the Roman Empire, and so forth, right? So therefore, when Daniel was giving the interpretation about what will come or what types of empire will come after Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar's perspective. I want you to just to put yourself in Nebuchadnezzar's perspective. He didn't like that. What do you mean other empire is going to just take over from Babylon? He doesn't like that. What he wants is he wants to have the Babylon Empire forever. I don't want any other empire to just invade it into Babylon and destroy us. No more empire. We will go to rule this Middle Eastern countries forever. So what did he do? Remove silver, remove bronze, remove iron, no clay, everything to be gold. So what does that mean?
He's trying to define the dream.
I don't agree with the dream that I had. I don't like those other substances. I want the whole thing to be gold, right? I don't want any other empire to really invade it into Babylon. So we, as a Babylonian, will rule the world, is literally what he's saying. So that I want to build the statue, the really big statue, that it's just made of a pure gold, which means only Babylon. No other empire. So that's why he actually built this, the statue, because he did not want to accept the fact that there is other empires going to come after Babylonians. So he wanted to. This statue is literally shows what type of thought that he had, Nebuchadnezzar had, that he didn't want any other empire to really just rule this area. So he wanted to just set everything and have everybody bow down to this statue, which means we will rule this forever. That's why he actually just called everybody. He called governors and prefects and satraps and counselors and treasurers and justices and magistrates and all the officials. So everybody in Babylon Empire, everybody come together, bow down before this statue, which means bow down before me. Because that statue represents not only Babylon Empire, but also Nebuchadnezzar and his kingdom, right? So what he said was, I'm not going to accept anybody who does not, bow down, to this statue, because this is my order, and you actually just respect of my empire. Everybody just gonna, follow my way, and everybody's going to just, follow all the rules that he has set up. Verse 8. Therefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They declared to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You king, O king, have made a decree that every man who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music shall fall under and worship the golden image. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall cast into a burning fierce furnace. There are certain Jews whom you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said to them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you are ready when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast out into a burning fierce furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hand? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If this be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fierce furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with fury, and the expressions of his face was changed against the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times more than it was actually heated. And he orders some of the mighty men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, and their hats, their other garments, and they were thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Because the king's order was urgent and the furnace was overheated, the flame of the fire killed those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell bound into the burning fiery furnace. So, think about this for a moment. As I mentioned, Nebuchadnezzar wanted to secure his kingdom forever. So that's why he actually built this statue, to making sure that everyone, regardless of the people, he wants them to really bow down before the statue, the big, gigantic statue that he built. But obviously, there are a few people in his officials really didn't like the Jews, including Daniel, as well as these 3 friends. And for some reason, obviously Daniel was not there. It seems like it was not in the capital of the Babylon. He actually built this statue in other cities. And obviously, for whatever reason, Daniel either did not go with the Nebuchadnezzar or he was away. We don't know exactly why, but the Daniel was not there. So when he ordered everyone to bow down before this statue when the music starts, but Daniel's 3 friend, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, did not bow down before this statue. This is one of the things that you have to understand. One thing, after Israelites came back from Babylon, they have learned good lessons that idol or other statues, whatever that man-made statue, is not God. They learned hard lessons. After they came back from Babylon, they never worshipped any other god, any other statue like they used to. Remember, until the time of the fall of Jerusalem, they were still worshiping other god and other statue, right? But they learned the lessons that when they were brought to Babylon as a captivity, and they learned the lessons. Oh, now I learned that statue is not God. They cannot do anything. It is not God. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have learned these are nothing more than just a golden image. This is not God. So there's no reason for us to bow down before this statue because it's not God. I worship God, which is the God of Hebrew. So when Nebuchadnezzar ordered everybody bow down before the statue, and then when they reported to Nebuchadnezzar that there are a few of the Jews did not bow down before this the big statue, and what Nebuchadnezzar did, he brought those Daniel's friends and asked them, "I heard the report that you did not bow down before the statue. I want you to bow down next, once we actually just play the music again. I'll give you one more chance." The reason that Nebuchadnezzar gave this the second chance was because Nebuchadnezzar really liked these the Jews, including Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He cared because after he heard the visions from Daniel, and when they came, they were better than the young men who came to Nebuchadnezzar. So Nebuchadnezzar had a feeling for the Jews that he wanted to really give a second chance. Remember, the positions that Nebuchadnezzar at this time was literally like, he was not just a king of empire, but literally he was treated as almost a god. Just like in the times of Moses, all right, when Egypt was the strongest of all the nations around that, Pharaoh was almost treated like God. Same thing with this Babylon Empire. Nebuchadnezzar is a king, and he was the one who actually just conquered the whole regions. He was treated like a god. So he didn't have to really ask Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego. He could have literally killed them as soon as he actually get the report and just kill them, just remove them. But he wanted to give the second chance because he cared for the Daniel's friend. But the response that Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego gave was astonishing, because let's take a look at verse 15. "Now if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, a trigon, and a harp, bagpipe, the horn, and every kind of music, to fall down and worship the image that I have made, well and good. But if you do not worship, you shall immediately be cast into a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?" So he's certain that no one can really deliver him from his end. So he was literally threatening these Daniel's friends. If you don't bow down, you will be killed. But the response that these friends gave to Nebuchadnezzar was astonishing. So verse 16, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter." When you think about it, Nebuchadnezzar does not have to wait for the next sentence. Imagine, he's like a god. He has the most powerful, authority in the entire region. Who would dare to speak to Nebuchadnezzar the way they are doing? Right? We don't have to answer you, king. Really? But think about this. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not fear to respond back to Nebuchadnezzar, regardless of who he is. He didn't just want to say anything but what he wanted to say. "If this be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king." So literally, He's just saying, even if you throw us into the fiery furnace, my God will deliver us from your hand. And what Nebuchadnezzar said, no God be able to deliver you from my hand. So he's directly challenging Nebuchadnezzar's statement. You're wrong, Nebuchadnezzar. My God will be able to deliver us. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. What's important is the last statement they made. But if not, even if he's not save us, we're still not going to bow down before this statue. When he made that statement, literally, they're just risking their life. And they know how Nebuchadnezzar will behave. Just by making that simple statement, they're dead. At the time, remember, they have no mercy. Right? The king could kill anyone. With this statement they're making, it is basically telling us their fate towards the Lord is not something based on, just instant emotion. They had a true belief God will save us and deliver us from the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, but even if he does not, I will not throw my fate towards my Lord. I will not abandon my fate towards the Lord. This is a very, very strong faith. This is something they were holding on to. So they were thinking, we were dead once before. When you actually came to Jerusalem and when you invaded into Jerusalem, literally, our life was on your hand. You could have killed us. Just like all the people who died in Jerusalem, we could have killed in our own hometown. But you dragged us here to Babylon. So, from our perspective, my life was once dead. But even with the life that I have, I will give it to the Lord, not to you. Just remember this. They had a very strong faith, which I adore and admire. But this type of salvation, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more, does not happen all the time. This is a very specific case to describe this particular incident. But this is not how it happened for the rest of the people who trust in the Lord. All right, let's continue on. Verse 24, the king Nebuchadnezzar was astonished and rose up in haste. He declared to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the fire?" They answered, said the king, "True, O king." He answered and said, "But I see 4 men unbound, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like the Son of God." Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace. He declared, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servant of the Most High God, come out and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the fire. And satraps, prefects, governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the body of those men. The hair of their heads were not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servant, who trusted in him and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruin. For there is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So Nebuchadnezzar was literally furious when he heard that they were actually answering and rejecting the Nebuchadnezzar's offer. So think about it from the Nebuchadnezzar's perspective. He gave the second chance because he cared for these three Jews. But they rejected it literally in front of everybody, right? Because there are a lot of officials and counselors and the prefects and officials and astrologer. The officials were there. Literally, these three Jews rejected Nebuchadnezzar's offer. From Nebuchadnezzar's perspective, he's been rejected by the three guy in front of all the officials in his kingdom. So I want you to think about it from Nebuchadnezzar's perspective. He was furious. Who would dare to even speak to the kings, the Nebuchadnezzar, like this? No one. But he was rejected. That's why he was so furious. Throw them into the fire. But when he threw these guys into the fire, not only just to throw them into the fire, but first thing he did was make it 7 times worse than what it is now. So actually they made it worse and threw them in. When they tied up all these friends and the armies who bound them up and then throw them into the fire was so severe and it was so hot, they're the one got burned and killed. As they were throwing, Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego into the fire, they were the one who killed before them. When they threw into the fire, Nebuchadnezzar was so astonished, he stood up from his own throne. Wait a second. We throw these 3 guys. Look like those guys are walking around. Not only did I see these guys are walking around, but I see the 4th person. Didn't we throw the 3 guys? Who is that 4th person? All 4 of them were walking around. So, I'm going to ask you this, kind of maybe silly questions that I may ask this. So, pick from this choice, all right? 1, when they throw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the fire only burned the straps they were tied them. Fire only burned their straps. Second option. Whoever the first person was in the fire, unbound them. Third choice. I don't know. I don't know. What do you think would happen? Which one would you choose? Fire only consumed the straps? not really burning anything else, just burning that strap. Or the fourth person might have actually untied him. Or we don't know.
I'm going to say it's the other in the fire.
Obviously, the Bible does not describe what happened, but I would guess the second options. I don't think the fire was actually burning the straps or the ropes. Fourth person who was in the fire, obviously, we would be in the same situations if you actually saw this kind of scenes. Well, 3 guys were thrown into the fire that almost killed the guy who actually carried them to the fire, right? It should have like burned them instantly. But there was a fourth person walking around with the 3 other guys who were thrown into the fire. Who would that be? Who would that be? The fourth person.
I think we all know it's Jesus.
So what did Nebuchadnezzar say? They're not hurt, and the appearance of the fourth is like a son of the gods. Obviously, we can tell who that person is. So literally for us, it's very simple. So, they were not burned. When you think about this, it reminds us one verse in the Bible. Let's just turn to John chapter 10. John chapter 10. We're going to read from verse 25. Jesus answered them, I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name bear witness about me. But you do not believe because you are not among my sheep. My sheep hears my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. I gave them eternal life, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch them out of the Father's hand. And the Fathers are one. Who can take from Jesus' hand? No one.
No one.
No one. This is exactly what Nebuchadnezzar said. When you go back to verse 15 at the end, who is the God who will deliver you out of my hand? Literally, this is exactly what Jesus said. No one. No one can snatch out of my hand. I can snatch my people from your hand, but no one can take my people from my hand. I can take it out from your hand, but you cannot take my people, my sheep, out of my hand or my Father's hand. If you go back to the story of Exodus, when you enter into the holy place in the tabernacle, and I explained this to you many times in the past, but let me just explain again. When you enter into the holy place, on the left side, there's a golden lamp. On the right side, there's a showbread table. And there are 6 bread on each that make up the 12 bread. On the showbread table, there is 2 layers that protects the bread does not fall under the floor. Even if the bread falls out of it from the stack, there's a 1 step that it protects it to fall out of that table. And there's another strap that almost stretched out from one hand. Let's just take a a quick look at that. Let's go to Exodus for a moment. Exodus chapter 25. We're going to read from verse 23. You shall make a table of acacia wood. 2 cubits shall be its length, a cubit its breadth, and a cubit and a half its height. You shall overlay it with the pure gold and make a molding of gold around it. And you shall mark a rim around a hand breadth wide and a molding of gold around the rim. And you shall make it 4 rings of gold and fasten the rings to the 4 corners of its 4 legs. Close to the frame, the rings shall lie as the holders for the poles to carry the table. You shall make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold, and the table shall be carried with these. And you shall make its plates and dishes for incense, and its flagons and bowls with which to pour drink offering. You shall make them of pure gold, and you shall set the bread of the presence of the table before me regularly. So, when you take a look at this, showbread table is not that big. As I mentioned, for some of you really just to join it later on, the cubit, 1 cubit is, as I mentioned, from the top of your fingers, right, to the elbow. That's a 1 cubit. So what is the size of that cubit? 2 cubits shall be its length. So think of it. 2 cubits is very simple. When you put your hands together like this is 2 cubits. From your elbow to the other elbow, those are 2 cubits. Literally, that's what it is. So that's not that big, right? That's the length, and cubit, its breadth. So the cubit is one. This is 1 cubit. So it is not that big at all. And a cubit and a half is the height, right? So 2 cubits in length, 1 cubit in the depth, and 1.5 it is the height. But what you do here is verse 24. You shall overlay it with the pure gold and make a molding of gold around it. So there is a molding around it. This is where you actually place the bread. So when the bread falls out of the stack, right? Then it gets into this molding. In verse 25, you shall make a rim around it, a hand breadth, which means there's another rim outside of it. How big? It's about the hand breadth, which means about the size of your palm. Remember, size of a palm, size of your hand, there's a rim around it. So even if that bread falls out of the molding, it gets stuck in the rim. So it doesn't fall out of the ground, which means exactly what we just read from the John chapter 10. No one can take out of my hands. So the bread will never fall out of the ground, to the ground. So this explains what this means. This is what Nebuchadnezzar was saying. No one can take out of my hand. Really? I can take out of your hand. I will show you. Literally, that's what God showed him to Nebuchadnezzar. You said no one can? I can. Because he said, no God can take out of my hand. And God was approving, objecting him. Literally, I will show you in front of Nebuchadnezzar and everyone, all the officials and governors and prefects, counselors, astrologer, all the officials were there to watch what Nebuchadnezzar said was wrong. What was God doing? This literally proved, I am the God. I am the God. He was literally proving that you know I am the Lord. This is exactly the same thing when God actually poured the 10 plagues over the land of Egypt. What did God say? That you will know I am the Lord. That's what he was proving to all the Pharaoh and Egyptians and everyone who living in the land of Egypt. This is exactly the same thing God is doing to Nebuchadnezzar and everyone in Babylon. Prove that I am the Lord. So this is not just about Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego not get burned. That's not the key. The key of this story is I am the Lord. That he's proclaimed to the entire nations that I am only the God. Because Nebuchadnezzar did not acknowledge it. I can even control, and I am more powerful than any God that no God can take out of my hand. But I'll prove it to you. I am the Lord. So, God was proving that he is the Lord. That's why this incident was a very unique situation. However, do not ever think this happens all the time. This is a very unique case because think about it. And throughout the entire Israel's histories, right? And even all the early church, the believers, what happened to those people who believe in Jesus and who believed in God? They were killed by sword. They were all killed. So you may say, oh, if we are in situations where we need to risk ourselves, God will save us. Not really. All the early church Christians who believed in Jesus and persecuted and brought to death, they're all dead. There is no salvation. However, when we think of a salvation, we were thinking of sparing my life out of that situations. That's not what God calls salvation. God's salvation is after death. So don't ever think that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego story is very common situations that happens to all the Christians. Not at all. This is a very unique situation. I just want to emphasize that. And he literally just trusted in the Lord, regardless of their, whether God is going to save us or not. Even if God does not save us from this fire, I'm still not going to bow before you. I'm not going to bow down to this statue at all because they're not my Lord. It's not my God. This kind of faith, it is not something easily that anyone could have. It's very, very difficult. But they had a firm faith. I think their firm faith came after they came to Babylon. Because remember, because we have learned the Jeremiah, right, and the Lamentations, God said, if there is a one righteous person, bring it to me. But Jeremiah couldn't bring anyone, which means there was no one, no believer, right? That's why Judah and the Jerusalem was destroyed. But they were living in Jerusalem at that time, right? Before they came to Babylon, they were living in Jerusalem. When Nebuchadnezzar actually invaded into the Jerusalem, they were the first one who was actually brought to Babylon. But they learned good lessons at the time.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So these three men was actually God saved them, but they didn't say that God put them alive. So I don't see the difference between this salvation and perhaps the salvation that happens to other early church leaders or other salvation cases, because I don't see them like being walking around in the fire, right? So it's after that. So then, in going back to early church leaders, they were killed. They were not kept alive.
Hmm?
But we couldn't tell whether or not they were walking around, walking with the angels after that.
Yeah, so what I mentioned, the salvation is, as I mentioned, this Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is a very, very unique case as recorded in the Bible. But when you look at the other prophets in the Old Testament, majority of them are killed. Right? God did not spare their life. Right? But even though they were not spared, they trusted in the Lord. What God mentioning about the salvation in the scripture is not about the physical salvation. It's more of the salvation of the eternal life. Of course, in the Old Testament, there are times that he mentioned about the physical salvation in this life. But typically, the focus is around the salvation in the scripture is towards the end time.
I agree. I totally agree. I just want to clarify this: 3 men, were they spared of life? Were they kept of life, or they actually died?
Well, eventually they all died.
But
Right?
at this moment,
This moment they didn't die.
they didn't die.
No.
Okay, that's the clarification.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Because they were walking around the fire.
But they were walking around in the fire.
Yeah.
That's what I read. In the fire.
Yeah, they were in the fire, but nothing was burned. Right? Because when they came out of the fire, there was no smell of a fire. Nothing was, even their garment was not, burned. They just came out the way they came in, right?
I see. Okay. So I missed they came out of the fire at the end.
Yeah, so this is why verse 27 says, and the satraps and the prefect and governors and the king's counselor gathered together and saw that the fire had not had any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads were not singed, their cloaks were not harmed, and no smell of fire had come upon them. So nothing was really touched. All right? But importantly, just take a look at pay attention to this one. One of the things that you will continually see in this book of Daniel is this. Listen to what Nebuchadnezzar is saying on verse 26. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the burning fiery furnace. He declared, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servant of the Most High God. What does he say? The Most High God. The Most High God. I want you to turn to Genesis chapter 14. Genesis chapter 14. Genesis chapter 14 talks about the Abraham actually saved his the nephew Lot and his families. All right. When you look at chapter 14, verse 17, we're going to read that particular section. After he returned from the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him, the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Shaveh, that is King's Valley, and Melchizedek, king of Shalem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered you, your enemies, into your hand. What did Melchizedek said? The Most High. This was the actual statements that Melchizedek was mentioning. And even Abram, later on, verse 22, But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted my hands to the Lord God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. Same thing. Abram said the exactly same thing, and he described the God as the Most High. Now, Nebuchadnezzar is the one who's actually proclaimed the God of the Most High. You're the servant of the God of the Most High. You will hear this particular statement in this book of Daniel many times. Especially in chapter 4, you will hear it many times. So Nebuchadnezzar is confessing. Nebuchadnezzar is not a believer of God, all right? But he's the one who's, he's confessing the God of the Most High. Now, if that's the case, coming back to Daniel chapter 3, verse 28 and on, we're going to just read what Nebuchadnezzar is saying. Nebuchadnezzar answered and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servant, who trusted in him and set aside the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree: any people, nation, or language that speaks anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruin. There is no other God who is able to rescue in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. When you listen to what Nebuchadnezzar is saying, it's almost a confession of a believer, right? So the question is this: is Nebuchadnezzar the believer of the Lord? Is Nebuchadnezzar, after he has seen this miracle, did he become a believer? No. He did not become a believer. He was just astonished by all the miracle he has seen. This is the second time he's seeing the miracle. What was the first time? When Daniel revealed the dreams, the vision of his dream, right? That was the first time. And this is the second time. This is one thing that I mentioned in the past. Does miracle make you to believe in Jesus? No. Miracle does not make you to believe. Seeing and experiencing the miracle could help you to believe. But the miracle does not lead you to believe. If the miracle is leading you to believe in the Lord, the people who came out of Egypt should have believed in the Lord. But what happened to those people who have seen all kinds of miracles? They all died in the desert. Right? They have seen amazing, miraculous things that God has performed. Who has ever seen those kind of miracles? They were experiencing every day. Why? Because not only they have seen the Red Sea was a splitting, but also what was leading them. In the day, the pillar of a cloud. At night, pillar of a fire. Who would experience that? They've been watching that for 40 years. Right? What about manna? They've been eating the manna every day. They have seen all kinds of miracles. They experienced the water coming out of the rock. But that miracle does not lead them to believe in the Lord. So even though Nebuchadnezzar actually said and confessed he's the Most High, that is just a confess that he only give because he saw some miracle. This is something that we have to be careful. There are so many people, even in church, they might have actually experienced a miracle, or they have watched someone's miracle. They claim, I believe. However, they could be like this Nebuchadnezzar's confession. They will not give their life for their faith. So, our confession may not be the true confession. Think about it. Even those 12 disciples who followed Jesus, what did they do? They all abandoned Jesus.
Yeah.
Even Peter said, Lord, I will never abandon you. I will follow to the death. And I'm sure his confession was, no false and no lie. But he could not keep this faith. He ran away. He even denied. Not only denied, he cursed Jesus. Right? That could happen today to the Christians. Chapter 4. King Nebuchadnezzar, to all peoples, nations, and language, and dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. It has seemed good to me to show the signs and wonders the Most High God has done for me. Remember, just kind of put an underline every time you see the Most High God. How great are his signs, how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominions endure from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in his house and prospering in his palace. I saw a dream that made me afraid as I lay in bed. The fancies and the vision of my head alarmed me. So I made a decree that all the wise men of Babylon should be brought before me, that they might make known to me in the interpretations of the dream. Then the magicians, enchanters, and chaldeans, and astrologers came in, and I told them the dream, but they could not make known to me its interpretation. At last, Daniel came in before me, he who was named Belshazzar after a name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And I told him the dream, saying, O Belshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and that no mystery is too difficult for you. Tell me the visions of my dream that I saw and their interpretations. The vision of my head as I lay in bed were these. I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew and became strong, and its top reaches to heaven, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth. Its leaves were beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it, and the birds of the heaven lived in its branches, and all flesh was fled from it. I saw in the vision of my head as I lay in bed, and behold, a watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. He proclaimed aloud and said, though, chop down the tree and lop off its branches, strips off its leaves, and scatter its fruit. Let the beast flee from under it, and the birds from its branches. But leave the stump of its root in the earth bound with a band of iron and bronze, and amid the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dews of heaven. Let his portion be with the breast in the grass of the earth, the beast in the grass of the earth. Let his mind be changed from a man's, and let a beast mind be given to him. And let 7 period of time pass over him, and sentence is by the decree of the watchers. The decision by the word of the holy ones, to the end that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of man, and give it to whom he will, and sets over its the lowest of men. This dream King Nebuchadnezzar saw, and you, O Belshazzar, tell me the interpretation, because all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known to me the interpretations, but you are able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in you. Nebuchadnezzar had another dream. God has really shown him many visions to Nebuchadnezzar, and there's a reason to it. And as I mentioned, remember, Babylon is recorded in the Bible. It's not, you cannot just think of it as just a country that exists in a human history. Babylon has a special meaning in the Bible because the Babylon represent evil kingdom, and the kingdom that against the God. All right, there's other most significant, significance in the Bible. So Nebuchadnezzar has seen another dreams or the vision, and he confessed again here, the Most High God has actually shown me this vision. I don't know what it is. So he called all the magicians and all the wise men in Babylon, and he told them, all of them his own dream that he had in his bed. Well, this time has a little bit changed from the previous one. The first dream when he actually didn't even tell them about dream. This time, he was telling them about his dream. Dream that he saw was what? Once again, we're going to take a look at it from verse 10. The vision of my head as I lay in bed were these. I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and height was great. The tree grew, became strong, and its top reaches to heaven, and it was visible to the ends of the whole earth. Its leaves were beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and it was food for all. Beasts of the fields found shade under it, and the birds of the heavens lived in its branches, and all flesh was fed from it. This tree, gigantic tree, in the midst of the center of the whole country, was there, and it was so big and reached to the heavens. And every corner of his kingdom was able to see this tree because the tree was so big. All the beasts is coming. Birds are coming. Everything actually come under the shade of this tree. Remember, what does tree represent in the Bible? Tree. In the Bible, tree represent two things. Number one, sometimes referenced as a country. Just like Israel is referenced as what? What is Israel is represented as in the Bible? Fig tree, tree of grapes, right? Olive tree, right? Israel is always referenced as those tree, right? And second, it also represents man. How? You have to really study the tabernacle in order for you to understand. That's why there was wood and covered with gold, right? Because that tree represents the man. But coming back, this tree that he saw will show a kingdom as well as a man. It represents Babylon and also represents Nebuchadnezzar. But it actually reminds of us something. When you hear the visions that Nebuchadnezzar has seen, it has to come to your mind something that we know that you can relate it to. What is that? We go back to the story, Genesis. Again. Let's go back to the Genesis again. Chapter 11. Genesis chapter 11. We're going to read from verse 1. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had the bricks for stones and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down and the city and the tower, when the children of man had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they purpose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their languages, so that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of the whole all the earth, and they left off building the cities. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the earth, and all there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth. What is this tower called? Babel. How did they actually build this tower? And what was the purpose of this tower?
So in case God would flood the world, they can escape it again.
So the man came together, they built the tower. So they don't have to rely on the Lord, but rather they want to build a tower so they don't have to ask the Lord to save them. Right? It is a man's power to build a tower that reaches to the heaven. They don't have to rely on the Lord to save them. So the man come together. They want to help themselves. They don't want to rely on the Lord. That's why they built this tower as a high to reach the heaven. But what did God do? He destroyed the Babel. Why? Because you think with your own power could reach me? Do you think you could actually help yourself? That's why God destroyed the Babel. And this is something that God, the men are always trying to do. We want to come together. We are smart. We can build something that we don't have to rely on the Lord. We want to become God. We want to become God. This Babel is the origin of Babylon. Right? Shinar is the Babylon. That's where they actually built the Babylon. So the tree represent like Babel Tower that reaches to the heaven. If the tower reaches to heaven, they can see from everywhere. And that's exactly what he saw. This also represents something as well. We saw it from Genesis first about the Tower of Babel. But now, let's go to last book, Revelation. Chapter 18. We're going to read from verse 1. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright and with his glory. And he called out with a mighty voice, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. For all nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality, and the king of the earth have committed immorality with her. And merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxurious living. Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, lest you make past in her sins. Lest you share in her plagues, for her sins are heaped high as heaven. Is that also similar to what the Nebuchadnezzar has seen? What is this? This is another Babylon story. What is coming together? Bird, the beast, unclean spirits are come under this Babylon. Just like the Nebuchadnezzar's visions, this big trees that he saw, the gigantic, the beasts are come under, birds are come under, they're resting because this tree is so good. Think about it. You probably see this all the time in your life as well. When someone is really powerful, people are gathered. When someone has the power, authority, and money, that's where people are gathered. Isn't it? Usually that's what happens. But when the person loses that authority and the power and the money, what happened? Everyone leaves. They don't come. When you have a power and authority and money, people will come. Because they see something they can get out from you. Either power or authority or the money, whatever they may be. An evil country, Babylon. Most powerful people are coming together. The beast, birds are all coming together. Unclean spirits. What does God do? What happens? Verse 13. I saw in the vision of my head as I lay in bed, behold, a watcher, a holy one, came down from heaven. He proclaimed aloud, and though chop down the tree and lop off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruits. Let the beast flee from under it, and the birds from its branches. So he cut down the tree, just like he destroyed the Babel. Right? Just like he's actually saying, come out of Babylon in Revelation. Do not stay, because I'm going to chop off. I'm going to destroy this city. So Babylon will be completely destroyed. Because I don't want you to be destroyed with Babylon. Come out. So God is saying, I'm going to chop this off. Why? Because a man cannot stand before the Lord. He's going to destroy it. Nebuchadnezzar was the most powerful king in his time. He believed in himself. His pride reaches to the sky. Because wherever he actually invaded, he was able to conquer. So his pride was so high. He's got money, right? He's got power. He's got army, right? Everybody's bowed down before him. So he believed, I am the king. I am the Lord, he proclaimed. And what God is saying, I'm going to chop it down. So God was giving him a warning. And then let's continue on from verse 19. So we'll hear the interpretation. Then Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, was dismayed for a while, and his thoughts alarmed him. The king answered and said, Belshazzar, let not the dream or the interpretation alarm you. Belshazzar answered and said, My lord, may the dream be for those who hate you, and its interpretation for your enemies. The tree you saw, which grew and became strong, so that its top reaches to heaven, it was visible to the ends of the whole earth, whose leaves were beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and in which was a food for all, under which beasts of the field found shade, and whose the branches the birds of the heavens lived. It is you, O king, who have grown and become strong. Your greatness has grown and reaches to heaven, and your dominions to the ends of the earth. And because the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven, and saying, Chop down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump of its root in the earth, bound with the band of iron, the bronze, and tender grass of the field. And let him be wet with the dews of heaven, and let his portion be with the beast of the field, till 7 period of time pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king. It is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king, that you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beast of the field. You shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and you shall be wet with the dew of heaven. And 7 period of time shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of man, and gives it to whom he will. And as it was commanded to leave the stump of the roots of the tree, your kingdom shall be confirmed for you from the time that you know that the heaven rules. Therefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by practicing righteousness, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the oppressed, that there may perhaps a lengthening of your prosperity. So this was a warning to Nebuchadnezzar. This happened before, right? This really happened. So Daniel gave the interpretation. He was perplexed, and he was actually having a little trouble to really just to give him an interpretation, because he knew this dream was about him and his pride. And how could even Daniel to speak to the Nebuchadnezzar, you will be thrown into the into the wild the field, and you will be actually eating like an ox. How could he ever tell the king Nebuchadnezzar such an interpretation? He was a little bit troubled. But Nebuchadnezzar was just encouraging him to just tell me the truth. What is interpretation? So Daniel actually gave him. So what he said at the beginning is this. when you look at the verse 19, at the end, he said, My Lord, may the dream be for those who hate you and interpretation for your enemies. I hope this dream was for your enemies, not for you, Lord. Because he was going to telling him, something bad, right? Something that he doesn't want to hear. But since the Nebuchadnezzar wanted to hear the truth of what the interpretation of the dreams, he had to tell him. But before he tell him, he was just, I hope this dream was for your enemies, not to you. This tree is really big and strong that every beast and the birds will come under this tree. That's exactly what was happening, right? Nebuchadnezzar was so strong that every countries and every people and all the beasts in earth and the birds were coming under because he's strong. But can this tree be forever? No. The tree cannot stand forever. So because his pride was reaching to the heaven, the watcher, the Holy One, was coming down from heaven and was chopping down the tree. So, once he chopped down the tree, what happens to the beasts and the birds? They flee away because the tree is no longer there. Because he chopped it off and only left the trunk and the root. That's it. That's exactly what God will do at the end time. So he said, you will be driven from the people, and dwelling shall be with the beast of the field. You'll be living with the beast, and you shall be made to eat grass like an ox. You'll be like, there's nothing for you to eat, so you'll be like, eating grasses like ox. And you shall be wet with the dew of heaven, and a 7 period of time shall pass over you. So what will he actually eat in the wild? Like grass? And is the morning dew? Is that something that he make? It's not something he makes. That's a natural stuff, which God gives him. The grass, dew, is not something that he can make. You will be eating like an ox. The ox does not eat other stuff, but what is in the nature. You'll be eating what's in the nature, what God created. You'll be actually drinking water because of the dews that is coming. You will know who provides, not you. Not your power, not your army, nothing. You'll be actually eating what God provided to you. That you will know. And how long? 7 years. 7 years. You will know. And God gave them a vision, and Daniel gave the interpretations, but he continued his own pride that he was able to experience what Daniel actually told him. In verse 28, all this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months, he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon. And the king answered and said, Is it not this great Babylon which I have built by my mighty power as a royal residence and for the glory of my majesty? While the words were still in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken, the kingdom has departed from you, and you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beast of the field, and you shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and 7 period of time shall pass over you, until you know that the Most High rulers the kingdom of man, gives it to whom he will. Immediately the word was fulfilled against the Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from among men and eat grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dews of heaven, till his hair grew as long as eagles. feathers, and his nails were like birds' claws. At the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reasons returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endure from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" At the same time, my reason returned to me, and for the glory of my kingdom, my majesty and splendor returned to me. My counselor and my Lord sought me, and I was established in my kingdom, and still more greatness was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are right and his ways are just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble. So, as Daniel interpreted his vision, he was driven away from people and living like an ox, eating grass, and his dew, the morning dew, was wet him for 7 years. His conscience was gone away. And after 7 years, he had experienced it. His mindset came back, and everything what he had was returned back to him. Right. One of the things that people ask, which is the very common questions people ask, was this documented in the history that Nebuchadnezzar was driven out from his own kingdom and lived like a beast for 7 years? What do you think? What do you think? That is not recorded in the history. This is not recorded in history at all. Then your question might be, then is this true? Right? Is this true? If it is not recorded in history, is it really true? Or is it a fiction? Does it really happen? But I want you to know this. As much as you and I know, the human history only record what is good. And history has always been altered to report the glory of their own kingdom. They will never record their own king, Nebuchadnezzar, was driven out from people and lived like a beast for 7 years. No one will record that. Then the question is, if it is not recorded in history, how do we know this is actually true? Right? Let me tell you this, which we're going to cover later on. You may not know this. Many of the historians, many of the archaeologists reference the Bible as a source for the history. You know why? Because over the years, they never thought what is recorded in the Bible is not true, is never in history. But when they found the things by excavation, they found what is recorded in the Bible is true. So many of them. There is no other records older than the Bible itself to find the history. Even though we cannot find the story in the Babylon's historical fact, that does not mean never existed. So, unfortunately, we cannot find this particular story that Nebuchadnezzar was driven from people for 7 years and lived like a beast for 7 years. But what we really need to focus is, why did God actually drive out he drive out the Nebuchadnezzar from the people and live like a beast? And God was showing him, it is not you and your power and your authority to help yourself. Who's in control? God is in control. It's not you. Even the kingdom that you own, it is not you, but it is the Lord. This is exactly what he said here. Verse 25, that you shall be driven from among men, and your dwelling shall be with the beast of the field. You shall be made to eat grass like an ox, and you shall be wet with the dew of heaven, and 7 period of time shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules the kingdom of man, and gives it to whom he will. So who's in control? God is. You think because you are smart and your armies are strong that you invaded into all the surrounding countries and you took control of this, you may think it is you and your army did this. Wrong. It is not you. It is the God who planned this. So God was showing Nebuchadnezzar, it is not you. It is me who's in control, is what he's showing to Nebuchadnezzar. And at the end, Nebuchadnezzar, after came back from the 7 years of this wild life, he learned he's the one who controls. Once again, when you listen to his confession, it's like a confession of believer, right? When you read this, actually, the confession, this is what the confession of the believer should do. And it's very similar. But once again, even after he came back from the 7 years of tribulations, do you think he believed? No. It was just a confession because he experienced something. But that did not lead him to believe. How do we know? How do we know that he's not a believer? From his perspective, there are many gods in Babylon. There are many gods in Babylon. You probably heard of the Marduk. Marduk was one of the famous national god. Of course, Marduk is not the only god, but there are other gods. They all worship other gods. So this God that he experienced is one of the God, not as true God. So he believed all other gods, and this God was one of them. So he was not a true believer. He could just confess it because he experiences something. As I said before, Christians can confess, oh, I believe you're the Most High. You can confess that. Such as, like most of other believers do. But your confession might be coming from your instant feelings or emotions, but not true belief. I want to actually go chapter 5, but I don't think I have enough time to cover chapter 5. So why don't we just actually wrap this up a little early today, and then we'll cover chapter 5. And next week, I'm going to share some of the historical fact about the Cyrus the Great. And I'll give you the historical fact of how Cyrus became how he established the Persian Empire, and I'll go over that historical fact as I'm explaining this chapter 5. So Does anyone have any questions about chapter 4 that we covered